Did you know this artifact left Nigeria not because it was stolen? Meet the Palace Door of Ikere, a masterpiece so powerful they called it the finest piece of West African carving ever to reach England. But wait a minute, did this door work and sail to reach England? I am Joana. Today we explore yet another untold story from Africa. How do we even take a door to England? Because when you think of a door, you think of a literal door. Perhaps you might think it wasn't a literal door. You might think, oh no, it was just a small sculpture. No, it was an actual door standing 7 feet tall. So me self, I confused. Early 1900s, in the Yoruba town of Ikere, the palace of Ogoga had doors carved from Iroko wood so hard it would bend iron. And the man who carved them, the Olowe of Ise, a legend. They said he carved Iroko wood like it was soft as calabash. On those doors he told stories. Kings on horseback, wives and children, priests, guards, even a whole kingdom carved into wood. Instead of using static frontal poses, Olowe turned the heads of the figures in opposition to the bodies to face the viewer. He crossed their legs to suggest walking or dancing motions. Now, between 1910 and 1914, Olowe carved the palace doors and lintel. They guarded the Ogaga's throne until 1924, when someone decided to send them to London for the British Empire exhibition. London saw them and said, this is modern art. They have never seen anything like this before. And you will keep telling me that you are not great as African. But was this just art? Or was it more than just carved wood? See, in Yoruba culture, doors like this weren't for decoration. They announced royalty. They told you this is a house of kings. So when it left Nigeria, something more than wood left Nigeria. Olowe carved differently. His carvings, like I said, they weren't flat. It was more like a kind of 3D kind of thing. Figures twisting, turning, and bodies moving like they were alive. He made wood breathe and stillness look like motion. I am sure if enemies were coming to your house and you had that door, when they see the door, they could turn back. The door even told a real story about the day the first British officer arrived in Yoruba land. Now, the left side of the door shows Major W.R. Reeve Talker, the first traveling commissioner, and Captain W.G. Ambrose, his successor, and their entourage of African porters, soldiers, prisoners, and British missionaries. Now, mind you, it is the British entourage carrying African prisoners on tour. This right side shows the Yoruba king and his entourage. The Arinjale and wears a conical crown surmounted by a bird is seen on the second register. He is accompanied by a court messenger and a musician. Royal wives and children, guards and priests, and others from the palace are also seen on these doors. Basically, this door was like a mirror of society, reflecting how we saw ourselves. At 1924 Wembley exhibition, the British could not stop talking about this door. They said, this is genius. This is most exquisite African art ever seen. And then, as they were praising it like this, better be afraid of, because that is when they were like, we need this door. So that was the time we would have just carried the door and would run away. When the door went back to Ikere, yes, it came back from that exhibition. It didn't stay for long. The Ogaga, maybe out of courtesy, maybe out of pressure, or it could just be simply trade by barter. We don't know. But it said it was exchanged for a British-made throne. Yes, a throne for a door. A king's seat for a king's symbol. Why? Probably he thought Olowe of Ise, the wood legend, will make another door, because that was not the only door Olowe actually made. Now, who was Olowe of Ise? Born around 1873 in Efon, Alaye, Ekiti region of Nigeria, and died around 1938. He was one of the most acclaimed Yoruba wood sculptors of his time, working in the region around Ise and Ekiti. And his style is noted for its innovation within Yoruba aesthetic traditions. He was patronized by kings and worked on palace architecture, doors, veranda, halls, lintels, ritual court art. His style is often described under the term Ogun Ona as Yoruba design aesthetics. He innovated surface treatment, movement, depth, and narrative in sculpture. Several of his works, the Olowe of Ise, has appeared at several auctions in New York. I'm talking about prices of like $80,000 to $120,000. The British Museum logged it neatly as wood carved Yoruba early 20th century, while the king throne remains in use in the palace at Ikere. Let's be real, these exhibitions weren't just about sharing art. To take a king's door and put it in the British Museum was to say, your greatness now belongs to us, and we shall do as we please with it. In fact, you can view it at leisure for free, but first of all, buy a ticket. Now, there's something very symbolic here. Trading a door, one symbol of security, for a throne, a symbol of dominance. Tell me what you think. How do you see this? Today, the door carved to guard a throne now hangs on the foreign walls. Most people today never heard of Olowe of Ise. Olowe's hand built legacy and history, but his name is almost forgotten. But not anymore. Today, Olowe of Ise is recognized as one of Africa's greatest sculptors. His work was studied, his name is remembered, his genius undenied, his art still speaks, even in exile. Here's a quick side note though. The Olowe of Ise made several doors. One of the Ise Palace Door. There are 2 panels. This is different from the Ikere Palace Door we explore in this content. Ise Palace Door was commissioned by the Olowe of Ise in 1904, and it explored the visits of British officers as well. The left panel is at the Met in New York, while the right panel is at the Smithsonian in DC. The Ikere Palace Door and Lintel, which is the topic of this video, was commissioned by the Olowe of Ikere in 1910, exploring royal possession and British visitors. That one is currently in the British Museum. Let's take a look into the story and the narrative and the symbolism of the door. If you look at the scene, this is where we tell stories. The scene, there are 2 women with infants on their back and the female attendant. One could assume that the uppermost register represents fertility, continuity, and domestic virtue, the well-being of the kingdom being with women who nurture life. In Yoruba palace iconography, women with children symbolize prosperity of the land under a just ruler. The presence of a female attendant indicates hierarchy and care within the palace household. So in storytelling, this narrative role could likely suggest a prelude, setting a tone of abundance and protection, like in scene 2, king called Arinjale. Though the label Arinjale technically refers to the king of Ise in Yoruba. Now, this mounted figure represents the archetype, Oba, the king, not necessarily one individual. And if you translate this in storytelling, this narrative role of this middle register could likely function as a core royal statement, power arriving in possession. It anchors the composition. The Yoruba court of the early 1900s were adapting to the colonial presence and imported firearms. These porters might represent either royal soldiers or emissaries preparing tributes or defense, who knows? In storytelling, this narrative role, this register, could introduce tension, a hint of the kingdom military strength and awareness of external threat. Colonial power, kingdom wars. You have 4 male soldiers, each holding a gun. Okay, this amplifies the previous register or the previous scene. Here, power becomes explicit. Yoruba palace guards carrying guns, now depicting the modernization of court power during colonial times. This could also symbolize the paradox of African sovereignty under colonial watch, kings maintaining symbols of power yet surrounded by sovereign military influence. So in storytelling, this narrative role, this register, acts as a visual reinforcement of authority. The bodyguards beneath the royal display. And the final scene, this chilling and dramatic register likely represents punishment. Perhaps a transgressor or a symbolic victim. I don't know. So the female body might signify fertility, misuse, or moral breach. I don't know. Tell me what you think. For those that know, a warning of consequences of disorder in the kingdom. Alternatively, some scholars interpret such figures as depiction of warfare aftermath, illustrating the cost of power and protection. So you see, there could be very meaning. Let's not conclude except you are the Olowe of Ise who made it, or the king who commissioned it. In storytelling, these narrative roles, this register could suggest a moral and spiritual warning. Power demands sacrifice. Disorder leads to destruction. We don't know. So you see, we had our own way of recording events, imagination, experiences, history. This single piece explores fertility, continuity, royal authority, communal joy and praise, preparation for defense, martial power, probably moral warning or sacrifice. So the next time you see something in a museum that says wood, Yoruba, 20th century, remember it is not just wood. It is a door that once led to royalty. And somehow it's still trying to find its way home through our stories. I am Joana, and this was a sweet exploration of an African artifact. Here we uncover Africa's untold stories.